All right, let's talk Newcastle. No better man to talk about the Geordies than Craig Hope of the Daily Mail. Craig, looks so much to get into. Before we talk Isak, and I know a lot of people will be listening wanting us to go straight into the Isak conversation, Newcastle have agreed a £4 million loan deal to sign Aaron Ramsdale with an option to buy him permanently. Again, if you're a Newcastle fan, you want more through the door. I know Elanga's come. Ramsdale, should Newcastle fans be excited about that? Is he better than Nick Pope? Is Nick Pope on his way out?
Should they be excited? Well, we can probably answer the question, are they excited? Because that deal is very much in the offing now. And the answer is probably no. They've already got a very deep stable of goalkeepers there. But listen, Ramsdale is a sensible signing. He comes in, he provides competition for Pope. The ideal, this would have been internally and externally as well with supporters, would have been James Trafford, a project player who could have inherited that number 1 jersey from Nick Pope. Brilliant with his feet, would have changed the way they played, would have allowed them to evolve over time, which is what Eddie wanted. That deal didn't happen. But Aaron Ramsdale is a good signing. But to answer your question, is it what supporters really want? Is it the news they're waiting for? Well, no, it probably isn't.
Who's making these signings now? Obviously, look, there is no sporting director. Is Eddie Howe in charge? It almost feels like we are going back when managers used to make the signings, such as Martin O'Neill that's with us. Who's doing the deals?
Yeah, well, Eddie has never not had control, really. And you've got to say, since Eddie came into the club approaching 4 years ago, they've absolutely knocked recruitment out the park. You know, Simon will tell you this. They haven't signed many bad ones. And those who they have brought in, they've put value on. No finer example than Alexander Isak. So Eddie's always had a certain degree of control. No player comes or goes without his say-so. That might be a little bit different with Alexander Isak, by the way, as we're going to talk about in a moment. But certainly the absence of a sporting director, the absence of a CEO, coming into one of the most important windows in the club's recent history, that's not good, and it has left a void of leadership there. So it's Eddie Howe with Andy Howe with Steve Nixon. That is the new transfer committee. They're all very capable, but they are finding it difficult.
Is it almost too much for Eddie to control what he does on the pitch, to now have sort of full control off the pitch? I mean, yes, you want managers to sign players, but I guess as a club owner...
Well, it's a fascinating narrative, isn't it? Because this time last year, everybody was turning around and saying how dreadful it was for Eddie having to work with Paul Mitchell, because Paul Mitchell was being divisive and not being facilitatory, and there was a rift between Eddie and so on and so forth. That was the narrative that's been spun this year. Now the narrative this year is the poor sod doesn't have a sporting director. Which one is it?
Yeah.
Well,
there needs to be a happy medium.
Simon, it can be both. Both things can be true. Paul Mitchell
both things can be media nonsense creating division.
No, I wouldn't say that. I'd say both things are true, Simon.
Part of the media nonsense.
Yeah. No, I'm not, Simon. Listen, you get me on here all the time to talk about my stories because they're true. So, you know, you guys sit there for 3 hours talking about it, so don't come back at me and say it's nonsense. You really enjoyed the Isak story I broke last week, didn't you? So there you go. It's not nonsense. Paul Mitchell. Now, would it have been better if Mitchell had stayed there this summer? Well, probably yes, because someone is better than no one. But was the Mitchell appointment right? No, it wasn't, as I wrote in.
But the point I was making, Craig, was that you guys were spinning the narrative last year that there was a massive division between the sporting director and the manager. And none of you have actually ever done these jobs, but you're so-called experts in it. So the reality is that Eddie Howe is perfectly capable of making decisions without a sporting director on what players he does or doesn't want. What he really wants is access direct to the money and the money to say yes to his requests.
You call it spinning the narrative. I call it reporting the facts. So there you go.
Mm-hmm. All right. Okay.
Well, no, I do. It's the truth.
Okay. Order. Let's talk Alexander Isak, Craig. I mean, that's what a lot of people want to know about. What is the latest? Yeah. What's going on? We're hearing things like he's not turning up for training. We're hearing things like he's down tools, that he's almost gone on strike. Again, look, you're closer to the story than anyone else. What's the truth here?
Well, he's not here. That's point number one. And, you know, if we look at the facts of this case before we go into the opinion and what may or may not happen, I'm fascinated to get Simon's take as well on this, believe it or not. He isn't here. He wants to leave the club. He wants to join Liverpool. We believe that Liverpool are ready in a British club record offer, and that is when Newcastle will have the decision to make. We don't know which way that decision is going to go. Now, from my take, if you're asking my opinion, I always think, and I think Simon will back this up, and that's why I want his perspective as a club owner, there's always a right time to sell a player. Alexander Isak at the moment has 3 years left on his contract. Newcastle are in a very strong position from that perspective, so they could and they should, and they probably will try to extract absolute maximum value for the player. The alternative is they keep him for another 12 months. 2 years left on a deal is an infinitely weaker position, and you've probably kept an unhappy player for a year. So that is the decision they're facing. The caveat to all of this is they cannot sell if they do not have the replacements lined up to come in. What they cannot do is agree to sanction the move, not have anybody lined up or at least one foot in the door, and then say to the world, hey guys, we've got £150 million to spend, because you know what will happen? They'll have their pants taken down and their bank account emptied. So it's a really delicate balance here. And I'd throw it back to my friend Simon. What's your take on it? What should they do? What would you do?
Well, I think you're right to some extent that they should extract the maximum value. That's a given. Again, certain thought processes have been about Newcastle's challenges with PSR. This is not a PSR sell. This is a player being courted by potentially a legacy football club and having his head turned. The challenge is what do you want to do as a football club? You do not get bigger, better and bolder by selling your best players. Of course, at the same token, Craig is right to say there was a time to sell a player. And it depends upon the football club. You could make the argument it was always a time to sell a player. It depends upon the club. Liverpool always had a time to sell a player. They sold Kevin Keegan in 1978 to Hamburg, or 77, whatever it was. It was the right time to replace him with Kenny Dalglish, and that was an opportunity for them. I'm disappointed for Newcastle, because I think that they're being hamstrung by the circumstances of timing in their ownership models, and we all know that. I think it's fundamentally flawed that Chelsea and Man City were able to do what they were able to do, and Newcastle aren't able to do what they're doing. I don't agree with the bleating around some of the Newcastle fan base that this is unfair, because it's no more unfair than when you raided Everton for Anthony Gordon when Everton were in financial difficulties. It's the nature of the beast, the circumstances. I'm disappointed in Isak because I don't know who his agent is, Craig. Who's his agent?
Vlado Lemic, a Serbian guy.
Okay. And I'm looking at this because I thought there was an element of, we're talking about Isak wanting more money at one point, and I thought to myself, that's a challenging one. You've signed a 3-year contract. If the market says you're worth more money, then you're worth more money, but you did sign a contract which tells that you're under a certain governance for the next 3 years. If I'm in Newcastle's shoes and Eddie Howe's shoes, I'm in a situation where Eddie's not in control of a situation. He never has been. You're never in control of a situation fully, are you, Martin, with a player?
No, that's absolutely, and more so than ever before now, because this question I was actually going to put, who is in charge here? Is it the football club or is it the player? Eddie said, he said yesterday something about it's in control to a certain extent.
Yeah.
What does that certain extent mean?
The player. What you can do in this situation is that you. First of all, Eddie said that there was no formal offer in, so whatever's happening is being happening elsewhere. So if a side like Liverpool are coming in and that's where he wants to go, at some stage, the club will have to just say, okay,
show your hand.
Show your hand, and here's the price.
Yeah.
This is the price that we are asking for. And you say to the player, this is what you're worth. I'm telling you, you've signed a 5-year deal. You've got 2 years. You have 3 years left to run. We don't want you to leave the football club. We never have wanted you to leave the football club. We'd love you to sign 10 years if that was the case. We don't want you to leave. But if you leave, this is the price. And if somebody comes up with that there, then we'll have to take it.
How do you reintroduce the player to a group that clearly are annoyed with a player wanting to go?
It's not so much. I'll tell you what, it's not so much that there, because the other players in the dressing room would like to be in the position that he's in. They'd love to be that for a start. This idea about players' loyalty, listen, it's out the window.
For the birds, yeah.
Here's the point.
And just on that as well, Simon made a point there that he was disappointed in Isak. And this is part of the dilemma Newcastle have got now, because if they do allow Isak to go, his behaviour and the way he's gone about this in the last 10 days almost sets a blueprint for any player wanting to leave. What do you do?
Well, that's why they got to be strong, Craig.
Absolutely.
Is there an instance, Craig, where, because everyone's going to wait for someone to blink, right? Whether it's Newcastle blink and throw the towel in and say we accept the player, it's got to go, or Liverpool pony up an offer and make it more formal than it currently is now, or the player comes to play and starts to become a bit more difficult and starts talking about transfer requests and things of that nature. Do you get any indication that, despite the fact that the player is playing hide and seek with himself at this moment in time, and we're reading between the lines as to why that might be, that you could find a situation like Riyad Mahrez, where all of a sudden the player has the audacity to really throw down the gauntlet and say, I want out of here and here's my transfer request and I'm not playing until I get some movement?
Yeah. Well, what's the greatest indicator of the future, Simon? It's the past. And what do the past 10 days tell us about Alexander Isak? Absolutely. I think he could be prepared to do that. He trained last Monday. After 5 minutes, said that he felt his thigh, walked back into the building, hasn't been seen around his teammates since. Had a subsequent scan. That scan came back clear. You join the dots from that. So if, when Newcastle do return to Tyneside and they start training and they start playing, will Isak want to be part of that? The Liverpool deal hasn't gone through. I've got my doubts.
From a legal standpoint, from an ownership standpoint, he's under contract.
Of course.
Newcastle is still paying him every single week for his services. How can he just decide not to train if he's fit to train?
Well, ultimately, you can put yourself in a situation where sporting chance becomes prevalent. And if you start going down the route of forcing players to evaluate themselves through medical conditionality, you're going to have a downward spiral. The challenge for me is what Newcastle are prepared to do. We've just seen Marinakis, right, tell his player, in no uncertain terms, believe this how you want to believe it. And he will tell this. Marinakis has told this boy he's going to do as he's told. And he's told him that ultimately, and the reason why the noise about contractual situations and release clauses are put out there is he's concentrating people's minds. You want to have a fight? We'll have a fight. Now, whether Newcastle want to go down the route, I think Newcastle are going to have to sell this player. What I want for Newcastle is to make sure they get every last single penny that they should get for one, arguably the most talented footballers in his position in the world.
Absolutely. Tell me this thing, Craig. Where is the agent standing in this? Has the agent gone to Newcastle and said that my player wants to explore possibilities, all that type of stuff? Does he know that there might be a proper offer in the table for the player at some stage or another? And the third point I really want to say is, if it doesn't happen, what's the fans' reaction to a player who was revered there? Now, my general view is this here, that foreign players get away with it more often than domestic players would do. Domestic players will feel. I've always felt this. Domestic players. I'm talking about British players. He's saying, playing in the league, who have tried to force the hand and had to come back again. I think the fans turn against them. But the foreign players seem to, after about a month, we're back in business.
So what would the reaction be?
What would the reaction be to Newcastle fans who have absolutely revered this player?
Yeah, okay, I'll answer your first point, Martin, and that is, yes, they have communicated to Newcastle's hierarchy their wish, their desire to move on. They wouldn't have done that without having the encouragement from Liverpool. So that answers the first point. The second point, now, if Alexander Isak was here and all of this was going on, he was still training, he was still playing, I think supporters would be more sympathetic to his situation. And I'll give you my take on this. I don't begrudge Alexander Isak for wanting to move. He's given Newcastle 3 tremendous years of his career. He's helped end the 70-year trophy drought. He's 26 later this year. He doesn't want to play in the Champions League. He wants to win the Champions League. He's also being paid a wage, which is probably half his value on the open market. Alexander Isak wanting to go isn't the issue here. It's the way he's potentially going about it and going to go about it. So if this didn't happen, and there's a lot of reasons why it couldn't happen, how he's then reintegrated to the fold with his teammates and by extension supporters, that might be a little more difficult than it perhaps could and should have been.
We're looking at Simon.
Did you get your coffee?
I did get my coffee. Thank you.
We got Martin O'Neill bought a coffee. Ignored all.
Can you tell the listeners what Martin did, by the way, as well?
Diminished all the production staff. Didn't offer them a coffee.
Nothing.
Just got it for us.
Just basically sent them out like the slaves. And didn't even once say.
The production team told me that you two were talent.
But thank you, Martin, for the coffee. Really appreciate it. Look at our chief football correspondent, Alex Crook, all suited and booted, nice tie.
Coat, is he?
Look at he's where are you, Alex?
I'm in my back garden at the moment, but as you can tell by the attire, straight off to Goodwood for another big day's racing as soon as I'm done with you guys.
Should be fun. Let's talk transfers. James Trafford has rejoined Man City from Burnley. We're hearing it's a record fee for a British goalkeeper. It seems like a strange deal considering they had him a couple of years ago. He's now gone back and Ederson's still there. So is it one for the future? Is it likely Ederson leaves? I feel like there's a lot of moving parts here.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I think it's more likely that Stefan Ortega leaves this summer, but I don't think Ederson had the best of seasons last term by his previously high standards. I think Trafford is coming in to put pressure on Ederson for that number 1 jersey. And you say it's a strange thing to do, buy back a player that you sold 2 years ago. He left in 2023 for £14 million. They're paying £27 million to bring him back on a 5-year contract. But I think Manchester City would say, actually, this is their policy, reaping dividends, sending young players out to get experience at other clubs, and then activating this matching clause. So Newcastle also had a £27 million bid accepted by Burnley, but ultimately Trafford has decided to go back to his former club. So I think they're pretty pleased with the business that they've done on this deal, Manchester City.
Martin, there seems to be sort of a really big amount now of good number 2 goalkeepers. Mm-hmm. And it's almost a thing that, I mean, there always were good number 2s, but not to this extent. Like every single club seems to have, or at least the top club seems to have a good number 2. Liverpool, Mamadashvili, Alisson, Arsenal, Raya and Kepa. And now we're seeing Trafford and Ederson potentially. It's interesting, isn't it, what's going on?
Right. If you in yesteryear, you didn't have that. You certainly did not. You know, you had your established goalkeeper, as we at Nottingham Forest had Peter Shilton.
You had Chris Woods behind him, right?
Young Chris Wood, but Chris was very young at the time, and even Chris didn't want to stay around and knowing that he wasn't going to play. Right. And Chris Wood turned out to be a fantastic goalkeeper, really, really good. But he was a young kid. He was fantastic for us in the 1978 League Cup final against Liverpool. Nearly was magnificent considering he was 18 years of age. He realised he had a proper career, but it wasn't going to happen at Forest because of Peter Shilton. The point I'm making now is that I think if you offer somebody really decent as a goalkeeper and say, listen, you have to fight for your place, or listen, it's up to you, but you're not guaranteed to play, depending on what club you go to. It has not surprised me as much as I thought it would do, considering that you have very, very good number 2s at football clubs. And I think it's probably to do with maybe a decent contract, or the possibility, yes, let me sign this now. If I don't break into the team in a year, I'll think about it again.
And Crookie, we continue that theme with Aaron Ramsdale. He's joined Newcastle on loan, a $4 million deal on loan from Southampton. Again, Nick Pope's there. That's a good number 1. I mean, is Ramsdale coming to take Nick Pope's place, or again, is it a good number 2?
No, I think his aim will be to be the number 1. He has the added carrot, if you like, of a place on the plane for next summer's World Cup with England. I think Ramsdale knows that not only does he need to be a number 1 in the Premier League to achieve that dream, I think he needs to avoid another relegation battle. It was a brave move to leave Arsenal's bench to go to a Southampton side that I think were always going to concede goals and go down last season. Arguably, they would have conceded a lot more goals without Ramsdale, who was probably their player of the season, which doesn't say much about the rest of his teammates. But I understand why Newcastle fans maybe are not overexcited about this type of transfer, particularly with the Alexander Isak saga dragging on in the background. But I think they're getting themselves not only a really competent goalkeeper, a good goalkeeper as he proved at Arsenal, helping them get back into the Champions League, but a tremendous character in the dressing room as well. I think once he does get possession of that number 1 jersey, and I do expect him to be Newcastle's number 1, maybe not at the start of the season, but certainly very quickly into the season, I think Newcastle fans will really take him to their hearts.
Well, let's talk about Liverpool. They've dominated the transfer window, mainly with incomings and outgoing now. Luis Diaz has joined Bayern Munich for a fee of around £65 million. I guess for Liverpool fans and for Newcastle fans, it almost points to, okay, now we have the money to go ahead and really go big for Isak. But I feel like Liverpool are losing a proven player here. And I do wonder if there's a mistake in letting someone like Luis Diaz in the peak of his powers go right now.
Yeah, I saw you were tweeting about that the other day. I guess there comes a time, and Simon will have been in this position as an owner, Martin as a manager. You have to decide when is the right time to let a player move on. £65.5 million for a 28-year-old with a couple of years left on his contract seems like decent business. I know Liverpool tried a couple of times to engage in talks to extend that deal, but I think he's always had itchy feet to go and try his luck elsewhere. Obviously, it's a great move for Diaz personally to go to Bayern Munich. He's quoted as saying that he feels he fulfilled his duty at Liverpool and achieved all he could there. So I understand where you're coming from, but I think if this is step 1 of getting a deal over the line for Alexander Isak, then maybe eventually this might prove good business for Liverpool.
On the business side, I guess it is good money, Simon, right? 65 million, as Alex says, for a 28-year-old.
Yeah,
2 years left.
I mean, but we're talking about 20-odd million quid for a 32-year-old Granit Xhaka going to Sunderland. It is the market. The market's the market. People pay what they pay. It's an interesting one because it's obviously now Slot is beginning to disassemble and reassemble certain aspects of what was the Klopp legacy. Last year, he had the embarrassment of riches of not having to do anything besides make sure they were pointed in the right direction. I'm not diminishing what he did by any shape or form. What I'm saying is normally the traditional orthodoxy is the players that he has in the building aren't his players and the team isn't his team. He had that luxury last year of being able to have a wonderful team that went in the right direction. He just kept them on rails and added his own unique touch to it. Yeah. Now we're seeing that change, of course, and obviously the Liverpool ownership would have been delighted last year. Not only did he bring a manager in, he don't spend any money, and he goes and wins with what they've already had. That's an owner's utopia. Now you're seeing it change a little bit. It's an interesting one because obviously the players had a lot of challenges, all the personal situations surrounding the abduction of his father and all of that in the background, and Liverpool were very supportive of his circumstances. He's a good player, but they clearly think, because if they wanted him to stay, I would suspect he would be staying. If they weren't that bothered and they can get a decent fee for him, then they've taken the latter option. I thought he was a good player. I don't know what you thought of him, Martin.
Yeah, he was a good player. Yeah, but I think I agree with you. I think that they think that 28 years of age might as well take this cash here, particularly if they are thinking about someone like Isak. If they are thinking about that, then you might as well accumulate some money, get some money in before you spend it again.
And finally, Crookie, we briefly touched on it. Granit Xhaka's moved to Sunderland. It was on and off, and now it's certainly on. It's happened, hasn't it? 13 million deal we're hearing with 4 million in add-ons. And they've got their man. They've got that experience to add to what is quite a young squad.
They have, and I think this could turn out to be a really important signing for Sunderland. We recorded the Premier League All Access podcast a couple of weeks ago and focused on those three newly promoted teams. And I was asked by Sam Matterface, which team do you think has got the best chance of survival? Him and Scott Minto both said Leeds. I went for Sunderland because I think they've made some decent signings. I'm intrigued to see how Simon Adingra lives up to his reputation, having had a bit of a nothing season at Brighton last year. But Granit Xhaka brings that much-needed Premier League experience. And it's a big call from him to leave Bayer Leverkusen, where he's had a couple of successful seasons, obviously played in the Champions League, to take a step into a relegation battle. I think tells you about his character. And they're getting a new goalkeeper in as well. Sunderland, a deal agreed this morning, £9.5 million plus add-ons for a Dutch goalkeeper, Robin Roofs. So he is to undergo his medical. What that means for Anthony Patterson remains to be seen, but I know the goalkeeping area is one that Sunderland have been keen to address this summer. I think we need Sunderland and Leeds and Burnley to be far more competitive than the promoted teams have been the last couple of seasons.
Cheers, Crookie. You look smart. Enjoy Goodwood.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers. Martin, on Slot, we spoke there about it wasn't a free hit last season, but it clearly was a Klopp team that he had to come and just almost handle the rails a bit. It's now his team. Mm-hmm. He spent a lot of money. FSG don't really spend that kind of money in one window. I think Klopp really never got anything like this. How much pressure on Slot now to deliver again? Like there's always pressure on Premier League managers, right? And especially a Liverpool manager. But surely it's been ramped up now several-fold because of the money that's been spent.
All right. Well, first of all, I don't think that you, at a football club like Liverpool, you get a free hit. I don't think you get that. I think you have to step in, and I think you have to try.
Especially following Klopp.
Absolutely.
But what were the expectations last season? Top four?
Well, I suppose so, but even so, listen, let me put it this way. He has, despite that, he has exceeded expectation.
Yeah.
And he's done wonderfully well. Therefore, he also has earned the right to spend some money as well, too. And he knows himself that if he doesn't improve the side, it won't improve. It's just as simple as that there. You have to put something in, and they're going for big players then. And it kind of reminds me at the time that I'm talking about Klopp. Klopp came into Liverpool, didn't spend something for a while, didn't believe in spending an awful lot of money, and then realised, maybe I have to. And then they end up spending about, was it 75 or 80 million for a centre-half at the time?
But they did that by getting Coutinho out the door for 145 million. They bought the goalkeeper for 70 million and Virgil van Dijk for 70 million with the Coutinho money, didn't they?
Coutinho didn't work out anyway. Let me put it this way: so they did well to get a lot of money for him.
143 million quid. You got Coutinho. That's what they got.
Is that right?
They got 143, and they went and spent it on Virgil van Dijk and on the goalkeeper Alisson.
143 million.
Yeah.
Gosh, he kind of reminds me of that Joao Felix. You know, the Joao Felix at this minute.
He's gone to Saudi, hasn't he? Let's talk Brian Mbeumo, who had so many suitors after a fantastic season, I think it's fair to say, from Brentford. The likes of Tottenham were interested, Newcastle was certainly interested, but he's decided to make his new home in Manchester under Ruben Amorim and that project. This is what he had to say as to the reason why he chose Manchester United as opposed to the other teams. I spoke to some other managers because I wanted to hear their projects, but the Manchester United one was very good for me. United is a big club, it's a great opportunity, and I chose the project. Again, he says, I'm someone who likes a challenge. This is a very good project here, and I wanted to be part of it. Project 4 times in a sentence. What is the project at Manchester United? Is it any different to the project at Spurs? Would it be any different to the project at Newcastle? Or is the pay packet just a lot bigger?
I don't think you would have to worry too much. If you're going to sign for Manchester United, you don't worry too much about a project. You're going to one of the biggest football clubs in the world. He's deserved the move as well too. He's a terrific footballer. Yeah. I don't think he has to keep mentioning this project, you know. What is the project? To improve from last season? Well, they should be able to do that if they win one more game. And, you know, we mentioned this again on Monday. What is it? Top 8 or whatever the case may be. Manchester United are Manchester United with a history that Sir Alex Ferguson, Matt Busby, all the great sides that they have had during their time. And project, you don't have to mention. You sign for Manchester United because it's Manchester United.
Is that still a thing? Because it's Manchester United, the biggest club in the world. We understand it, but ultimately it's a team that's not in Europe.
It doesn't matter whether I'd say this idea. Everybody wants to go and play Champions League football. Sometimes they have to ask themselves. I don't even believe that footballers care about that as much as they say they do. They don't. Not at all. Do you sign for Manchester? If you're given the chance to sign for Manchester United, you take it. You don't mention a word about project. Listen, I'm sure it's just that sort of talk now at this moment. Maybe somebody has ingrained them with some sort of thought that there is a project here. The project for Manchester United is to improve.
Yeah,
is to actually be competing at the very, very top level with Liverpool, Chelsea, and the rest of it, and Arsenal in the not too distant future, like pretty well quickly.
Yeah, I guess the next question is: we'll only know at the end of the season whether or not he's chosen the right project.
Well, I mean,
but do you think he's going into something?
Sorry, Sam. I don't think that would matter. Manchester United, if they didn't improve at all, Mbeumo's still a very, very fine player, and he's still chosen.
But we have seen fine players go there in the last couple of years, and they've just vanished. It hasn't worked, and they've had to go and leave.
Well, maybe some of those fine players might not be as fine as Mbeumo.
Good shout. Yeah.
I mean, we're in the business of words, so it seems like it is a bit mean-spirited to talk about semantics, but he could have said vision.
Yeah.
The vision, he's bought into the vision of this particular manager. The interesting thing is about the lure of Manchester United, which is part of your question, and how it still pulls. Well, it will pull a player from Brentford, and because Man United still has the lustre, imagery, iconography, and feel of a football club that once upon a time bestrode English football, dominated the Premier League for the first 4 of its 5 years of existence. This is not the same Man United. It's got lots of different challenges in it, and from people that tell you it hasn't got any money, to the way the football team is playing, and the fact that they tell you they've got no culture inside this football club. I would suggest that they're not quite the same draw as they once were for elite footballers that are coming from elite football clubs. With all due respect to Brentford, you might not pull a player out of Bayern Munich or other football clubs quite as easily as Man United over other clubs in English football that are now achieving things more. But of course it has all of the opportunities that Man United wants. But go back to the 70s. Man United took Frank Stapleton from Arsenal. They've always had a draw, even when they were the 70s incarnation of themselves that won the FA Cup a couple of times, and were this club that had been relegated 4 or 5 years before they re-emerged back in English elite football as a moderate force, until Ferguson arrives in 86 and takes 4 years to get himself into a situation where he wins anything. And Crystal Palace helped him with that. But
can they still, to this day, and again, I'm fully with both of you, they are, with Real Madrid, the biggest club in world football. That's not going to die because they haven't won some trophies in recent years, the big ones. But can they still attract the elite players? Can they still get the elite players?
Well, it depends whether players. This is my view. It depends whether players know the history of football clubs. You know, you're talking about young people coming in now who might not even know the history of the football club that they are involved with, you know. And I'm not saying they have to read every single book about it, but you have to have some sort of a feel. Manchester United still command that feel. I will dispute that with anybody. They still command that feel. It's Manchester United. They're massive. And if I was a player now, somebody give me this opportunity and said, oh, listen, Manchester United will be 3 years before they're in the Champions League again. it wouldn't matter one hoot.
Depends who else has been.
That's
Depends
it.
who else
Depends who else
at the
is
same
into
time.
them.
And the big thing I've always made a point of, and I'm in the same camp as him, which is Man United. This is iconic football club. But generationally, what's happening? If you stop winning things, the next generation of football fans don't have the same relationship with the idea of Man United that once was before. I've always said, you know, Man City are a Red Bull, Man United a Ferrari. But generationally now, if you have another 10 years of Man United not winning things and Man City or XYZ football club dominating English football, the next raft of people that perceive Man United as a big football club will look at it very differently, because it will have been 20 odd years. And you know, of course, you'll never lose Best. You'll never lose the trinity of Best, Charlton and Law. You'll never lose that iconography. You'll never forget 1958. You'll never forget the dominance of the Premier League during the 90s and early 2000s. But there's new guys in town that if you're pitched against them, if you've got an opportunity to sign for Man United or Newcastle, at this stage in Newcastle's development, you're still going to possibly choose Man United. This kid's just proven it. But if you get Man United and Man City, a whole different set of dynamics. And the only reason people like Alexis Sanchez went to Man United rather than Man City is because they got offered more dough. And that told me everything about Man United. The players' perception was, this is now a cash trap. I go to Man United not necessarily to win things. I go to Man United because I get paid more money.
Yes, I do take that point. In terms of generations, and the longer Manchester United go without being the big club that they should be, I do take Simon's point in that viewpoint. But again, it's getting back to players. Players should know a bit of history. They should. I say you don't have to be reading the book about when Sheffield Wednesday were
but they don't,
born in 1865.
Some of these players don't.
But they don't.
They don't know, and I don't think they'll care.
No, they don't. No,
but they don't know. I remember years ago, so it was an off couple. I mean, Bill Wyman. Remember Bill Wyman from the Rolling Stones? You probably don't. Bill Wyman comes down to Palace and watches Palace. He's a big Palace fan. Comes to watch them at the training ground in Spain. We're doing a pre-season tour. Clinton Morrison said, "Who's he?" I said, "He's Bill Wyman, you know, from the Rolling Stones." Who's the Rolling Stones? Get out of my sight, Clinton. Get out of my sight.
Clinton Morrison.
So what do you
I might not know him, but I know who the Rolling Stones are. All right, another person that's had a few things to say on the tour is Manchester United defender Luke Shaw, who has backed their head coach Ruben Amorim's hardline approach to improving the toxic and unhealthy culture at the club. This is what Luke Shaw had to say. He's extremely tough on the group. He leaves no stone unturned, and I think there are no stragglers in this group anymore. I think everyone has to put the team first. He's made that very clear. Luke Shaw actually doesn't even play that much football for Manchester United at the moment, does he? When fit, fantastic. But even Ruben must be looking at him thinking, as good as you are, and these words are nice, you don't play enough. You never fit.
Yeah, but sometimes when a manager steps into a football club, players want to ingratiate themselves with him, you know, and they say some really nice things. It's the usual thing. Or training has improved immensely after a day and a half or something. Oh, it's really far better. He's got great ideas. He's got all of these things here, and of course that lasts.
And Rashford was the poster boy for that with Ruben Amorim, and then 5 minutes later he wants to leave.
Absolutely, and it's exactly that there. And then 3 weeks later, that player's not playing, and he's a totally different attitude to everything. At the end of it all, players, there shouldn't be a toxic atmosphere, and that's created by players at the end of the. So it shouldn't be. At Manchester United, you should be fighting for a place in the side, and if there has been, is that? I think if there has been a toxic atmosphere, is that not a discredit to the players in many aspects?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Okay.
Who's the leader in that United dressing room? Who gets rid of that toxic atmosphere? It's not Bruno, is it?
Well, if you are the captain of the side, you should have a bigger say than some of the other players. I have no idea.
Let's talk Yoane Wissa. Newcastle interested. According to all the papers, he hasn't turned up for training. We are hearing that he is expected to return to training for Brentford this week. 19 goals in the Premier League this season, 28 years of age. What's a Yoane Wissa worth in today's market? Newcastle, we believe, have rejected or put in a bid of 25 million, which was immediately rejected by Brentford. Obviously, this is a team that's lost its manager in Brian Mbeumo. They have to keep him, but surely, as you guys always tell me, everyone has a price.
Well, he's worth more than 25 million.
He certainly
in
is.
today's prices.
Yeah,
absolutely,
is.
No question about that. There, he's a very, very fine footballer. He's been excellent in the last couple of seasons, and so £25 million in today's money is ridiculously low.
Yeah, if you Keith Andrews, Simon, I mean, you can't have many more.
Mate.
Huh? Martin's best friend. Yeah, that story's still to come. You can't have many more leave the club, can you? I mean, I think Brentford will struggle.
He can't. He's not going to be able to control that to some extent. Certainly, you're not entertaining an offer at £25 million, irrespective of how much the player jumps up and down and turns into a Tasmanian devil. He won't be going. And unless you get a proper offer, which is probably in excess of £40 million, it's not a conversation, because A, you can't redeploy it anywhere else because you're not going to get much for that money anyway yourself, unless you're going to delve down and really put yourself at risk, because we already know there's a possibility that Brentford are pushing the envelope with not only losing a manager, replacing him with a manager that's yet to prove himself, may well have talked himself into a good job, but he's still got to prove himself. And this is the big league now. This is the big game. This is where the questions get asked, and not the punditry observations that one can make about things that they haven't actually done themselves. And then you've also got the loss of resource, where you've lost a captain to Arsenal, you've lost a very influential player, one of their best playmakers, and a chief contributor of goals and contributions and assists in the boy that's gone to Man United. In Burma. If you lose your centre forward, now no one's irreplaceable, but you're making it more and more difficult for yourself. If these players are, disappearing out the door alongside the challenge of a new manager, irrespective of whether he's grown up inside that environment and been employed as Thomas Frank was as a result of a succession programme, you still got challenges. And from that point of view, it's a real difficult time for Brentford. But they've got to, if the player now has decided that he is going, and Newcastle are doing to Brentford what they're getting upset about. There is an irony. What goes around comes around, doesn't it?
So it's massive. Let's hear from new Brentford manager Keith Andrews. This is what he had to say about Yoane Wissa.
Yoane, who's gone back to London, was Yoane's decision, with obviously speculation. I think it's pretty common knowledge that there's clubs interested in Yoane, not surprisingly. So Yoane felt it was the right thing for him to go back to London. I think it's pretty simple, really. He folds back into the group next week when we come back to training. He's training currently with Frank at the moment at the training ground, training really well.
He would never have had anything like this situation, Keith Andrews, where players decided to pack up and go back home. How's he going to be able to deal with this?
Well, he would have experienced something like this here, I'm sure, in his playing days. But as a manager stepping into it, these, as Simon mentioned, these are difficult situations, even for managers who have proved themselves or who are, who have been managing for some years. You do not want to lose your players. You're stepping into a new season, and you have expectation about you now. Brentford, remarkably, would be considered, a Premier League team now for what the previous manager has done for that football club, and so the expectation is.
What would you do in that situation? What would you do in that situation there? What would, put aside what would you do?
I would do exactly what I think. I would say, very, very difficult to keep unhappy players. You try your best, first of all. You have a conversation with them to say, listen, we want you to stay at the football club. We'll try and improve your contract if that's really what you're looking for. If it's not what you're looking for and you want to go, here's a set price. Somebody makes it there. That's what it'll do. In the meantime, you'll have to be working furiously behind the scenes to try and get another player.
What am I missing in, Martin?
Right,
we had it with Victor Gyökeres, who decided, I'm going to stop playing football for Sporting Lisbon. We're having it with Isak, who's decided, I want to stop playing football for Newcastle. And now we're hearing Yoane Wissa decided to stop playing football for Brentford. Why can't these footballers just play football, train, and let their agents do the noise and all the handshaking behind them? Why can't they just concentrate on football? Why are they going on strike?
I agree with you, absolutely. But this is nothing new.
Who's telling them to do it?
The agents.
Of course. A player might want to go and try and improve himself. And again, getting back to it, if that's the case. And I know I mentioned this on Monday in a similar situation I had with Gareth Barry. Gareth Barry was a brilliant player for me at Aston Villa. Great player before even I went to the football club, but did exceptionally well, got back into the England squad. And I had what I felt was a really good relationship with him. So I'm doing some punditry work for TV in 2008 or something, I guess here. I pick up a newspaper and I find out that Gareth Barry has wanted to leave to go to Liverpool, and that this is the first I knew about it, and that I was doing some punditry work and I should be back there to help him get to Liverpool. No, I didn't want him to get back to Liverpool. I want him to stay at the football club. And I kind of fell out with him big time. So what we did do, or what the chairman did, the owner, said, what do you want to do, man? I said, well, I'd like to keep him, but if he's unhappy, we have to put a price on it. And that's exactly what he did. Liverpool had bid some money for him. It wasn't enough. And Mr. Lerner said, that's £10 million. This is what we want for the player. He can go. Liverpool did not do that. They got as far as £8 million. The player became disenchanted, but with us to begin with, but more so with Liverpool, primarily because they didn't do the deal. They said they didn't have the money, and then a fortnight later signed Robbie Keane for £20 million. So what you had to do is get a disenchanted player back into the fold again. And Gareth Barry turned out to have, he had a number of great seasons before that, and he was absolutely fantastic. But that was in his character to come back, get the disappointment. And he went to Manchester City the following season. We got £12 million for him for the following season, and went on to win dozens and dozens of trophies.
It depends upon the culture of the football club as well. I mean, I make the point, and I will make it again, and I don't apologise for it, it's to the eternal discredit of the PFA that they don't condemn these sort of actions where players downing their tools, because it makes the PFA look like a one-dimensional beast, which in fact they are.
Couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more with it. I'm not saying that one-dimensional. I couldn't agree more with it.
They could do more.
Now, you've got the culture of what you're prepared to do with players and how they're prepared to understand their responsibility in the equation. You've just seen Marinakis. I make the point again, and I make no apology for it. Morgan Gibbs-White, irrespective of whether he was agitating to go, and how do you think people got to know of his release clause? Let's have it right. But he still turned up for pre-season training. He still got on with his job. He's now being portrayed as being, he was exemplary during that period of time. Well, that's wonderful. Thank you very much for turning up and doing the basics, right? And this culture's crept into the game, and it's been creeping in for longer and longer. Player power becomes part of it. Agents' influence becomes another, and the lack of fortitude in owners and their courage of their convictions to say to people, well, I'm going to concentrate your mind here. Whether you like it or not, we are stuck with one another. I got you for 3 years and you got me, and you don't want me for 3 years under the terms that you think you're going to get me.
And you were happy to choose me.
Right.
I didn't force you to choose me.
But it's a balancing act.
Can I tell you a story against myself?
Go on,
right,
30 seconds, go on.
Yeah, quickly, I can not tell a story in 30 seconds.
A minute, I'll give you a minute.
Okay, you'll give me a minute. I got left out of the team at Nottingham Forest in a game. I decided this is it. I'm not going to play anymore for the football club. I want to leave. But that was a totally different situation. I never really wanted to leave the football club, but I said I'm having it. And Clough said, "Don't you dare! You turn up for this game on the Saturday." I didn't turn up for the game on the Saturday.
Bit of a rebel, wasn't you?
To my eternal discredit. But the game was called off. But Brian Clough came over from Derby. We were going to go through Derby to play Stoke City at the time. He came to the City ground to see whether I had turned up in the bus or not. So I got done 2 weeks' wages, and I had it was ridiculous. However, totally different circumstance. I wanted to play for the football club rather than the other way around.